This is crazy. It's supposed to be healthcare. And it was just mind-boggling. There's such a great opportunity to lead in this space.
Find a partner that meets your needs.
Put yourself in the patient's shoes.
And when patients understand, patients are happy.
Organizations that succeed in this are going to be the ones that bring in RCM.
We're always looking for chances to do better.
The problem in our industry is
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Vendor Voices. We're joined today by Josh Vierling, president of Parathon. How you doing today, Josh?
Very good. Thank you for having me, Ryan.
We're happy to have you. We're excited to learn more about you and your company and everything that you do. And as we do in all these episodes, we start off with the Snapshot Challenge. Josh, are you ready for the challenge?
Let's do it, man. Yeah.
All right, here we go, diving right in. Question number one, who is Parathon?
Parathon helps hospitals and large physician groups ensure their financial future. And how we do this is pretty unique. We have a very sophisticated validation engine that identifies more underpayments, helps determine root cause of denials, and then through that, they can also use solutions to better negotiate contracts, to look at strategic pricing and be able to do strategic pricing in a way that is effective and doesn't, result in a number of policies related to that. Net down at time of bill, be able to estimate do patient estimation at the patient access. And the validation engine also lends itself to be able to do very effective zero balance and underpay audits, which can increase revenue, but more importantly, can pinpoint different payer trends and root causes and things along those lines. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that kind of answers who Parathon is.
Hey, as long as we keep this under 5 minutes. Question number two, who does Parathon serve?
Sure. So Parathon works with large hospitals. We work with a lot of rural health, particularly around ensuring that they have accurate, contractuals, accurate expected reimbursements, and they help with denials. And we do a lot of work with larger physician groups, not so much the smaller ones, but larger ones that may have more complex contracts or policies that impact them a little more.
All right, question number three, what problem is Parathon solving?
So the core problem that Parathon solves, which is becoming more and more relevant in what we're seeing in our conversations, is payer accountability. Most hospitals can't keep up with complex contract loads. They definitely can't keep up with policies. Some hospitals can deal with thousands of policies. They could deal with maybe even 100 in a day. So there's no way to keep up with that. And without the ability to see what impacts their bottom line, you can't hold payers accountable. And that's really what we're solving for. So we're able to ensure that they have effective JOCs, they have effective, if they're going into arbitration, it's effective, those types of things. But payer accountability on the bottom line is what we solve for.
Got it. We probably touched on some of this in question one and question three, but how is Parathon solving those problems?
Yeah, absolutely. So Parathon solves it through its validation engine, which is the most sophisticated validation engine that marries all the contract policy details to the claims and remits in a truly unique way that allows you to reprice the claim and see that it's accurately priced. And we also integrate through Microsoft with powerful LLMs and AI, like ChatGPT models, or the Google models. So that allows you to talk with your data, talk with your policies, understand the impact of those things. And all of that all that technology is wrapped in deep human expertise too. So we have great staff that used to work for payers. They understand contracting, they understand coding, they understand denial root causes in detail. So it's kind of that trifecta that really gives us how we solve the payer accountability problem.
All right, last question. How is Parathon solving that problem differently?
I think the differently is putting an emphasis on what is the lifeblood of the hospital. And this is my free form answer here, but the lifeblood of the hospital is the contracts and the policies. I can go into any hospital I feel very confident and poke holes in expected reimbursements, especially when you look at policies. So we validate those on the front end against the claims to ensure they're priced 100% accurately with all the rules, all the, the nebulous misunderstandings that can happen. And we validate those at the front end. And from there, using a very sophisticated engine, using AI tools, using expert staff, we're able to solve that problem in a way that I think is different than what the industry offers today.
All right, Josh, thank you. That was the Snapshot Challenge. We're done with that. We can loosen up. We can talk shop now about the things that you and
Pressure's off.
Parathon
All right.
are great. Yeah, exactly. But before we do that, I want to give you the opportunity to tell the listeners a little bit more about Josh Vierling. So have at it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the president of Parathon. I've worked both the payer and the provider side for approximately 25 years. So I have 25 years of revenue cycle, payer experience. A lot of my work has been in managed care capacity and providing solutions to payers and providers, but it gives me a unique perspective. I started my career working with TriZetto, which is the adjudication engine and the contractual engine that many of the payers use today. So I clearly understand how those systems are configured and how that, filters over to the provider world. It's very relevant today because a lot of times we can pinpoint this, in my opinion, humble opinion, other vendors can't. Payers will misconfigure contract loads. They'll not load their contracts accurately. They won't load the policy impact of those. And being able to understand those over my career and how that works has been, and understand revenue cycle has been helpful. So that's kind of the high level snapshot.
Yeah, appreciate it. I've certainly seen as I've met with more and more organizations in the contracting space, be it negotiators who sit first chair or support negotiation, be it those who are building the technology to support it, or those who do a full managed service wraparound. I see a lot of, we were on the payer side, we came over to, dare I say, the good side, and with that, we brought some knowledge that's particularly helpful in understanding how things work on the other side. So I see the value in that. But let's talk tech. So I think in your answers in the beginning and our conversations outside of this, I know you're very confident in Parathon's ability to be very precise in expected reimbursements of claims. Regardless of what technology you're using, I know it is 2026, technology is rapidly growing. The importance of structured, organized data, it's critical. Parathon, I believe you call it the parallel database. That's your consolidated financial and revenue cycle data. I want to talk more about that. So first, based on your experience, what data sets would you recommend to a provider to combine into one overarching database?
Yeah, and this is becoming more and more prevalent with the advents of AI solutions, right? Because you first, to leverage any kind of AI or what they call large language model, which are very, very powerful, but to leverage that, you have to have a sophisticated database that has its schema translated into to be able to communicate with an LLM. That's very difficult to do. We know because we're firsthand involved in that. So in terms of, to ask your question directly though, in terms of data sources, so we're typically looking at, we want to see the insurance master, we want to see the typical claims, clean scrub claims, we want to see remits, the contracts. We typically already pull in all the policies. There may be some policies that we have to grab through Availity or something else, but we'll pull those in. If we're doing strategic pricing, we're going to need the CDM to be able to do that. And there's some other, data sources as well, but not a lot. But that's in essence what we're looking at. But the complexity is then combining all of that. It's not a flat linear combination. It's got hierarchies. Contracts have hierarchies. There's outliers. There's carve outs. All these hierarchies have to be accounted for. And it's really almost impossible for hospitals to keep up with that unless they have massive staffs of people to do that. And they typically don't have the sophistication of the technology to do that. So those are the data sources we're looking for. And then we plug that into this validation engine that I mentioned and AI to be able to communicate with your data, program agents, and do those kind of things.
So what do you get when you put all this together? Why is that so important?
You get a basis, a foundation for holding payers accountable to denials at the root cause, and you get immediate information, right? Whether you're using analytics, reports, or AI, you can literally talk to your data and get a response back immediately. So you get a foundation to hold them accountable. But the problem that I see in arbitration, JOCs, is the data they're providing can be argued against by the payer in a sophisticated way. They don't have an exhaustive list of data points and really solid data to do that. So that's what we do is you get a foundation to be able to have expected reimbursements. You can net down at time of bill. We're doing that with our clients. Not a lot of people are netting down at time, but when you do that, you have less variability in your financial models and your financials, but it's important. But you can't do it without that sophisticated validation engine, these AI tools, or the people expertise.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it probably felt almost like a trick question, right? What is the value of all this? It's being able to understand what you're actually owed, right? Because you do need every aspect of that if you're going to do it with precision. So
Correct.
for those organizations out there that maybe are thinking about this or maybe aren't thinking about this, how can they actually evaluate their current data architecture and if it's up to snuff?
Yeah. The first thing that came to my mind that I think is important that I'm seeing more and more resonance around and more projects that we're getting. And maybe this is not the answer you're looking at, but is doing a zero balance or underpayment audit, but with that focus on the contractuals and the policies. That is a great way to understand your root cause problems in terms of denial, understand your root cause in terms of underpayments, understand payer trends, and at the same time, generate cash that can be used for capital expansion or projects like that. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but this is what I'm seeing happening today because the vendors that provide these services just don't have the sophistication of system to be able to look at the entire claim set and tell you exactly what's underpaid and why.
Yeah, there's not looking. I mean, we're asking because you're thinking about this day in and day out, right? So
Absolutely.
having an answer that might be different than what others would expect, I think is actually more valuable, right? So the more obvious approaches people already know. So seeing what's kind of falling through the cracks by doing a zero balance review, I think makes sense.
A contractually led zero balance review. Very, very different than
Gotcha.
kind of what the industry is looking at. We're using that validation engine. But yeah, to your point, you're absolutely right. Yes, very well said.
Yeah. So last thing, given the importance of data that we've outlined here, and you're coming across organizations and dealing with their data a lot, what are some of the most common data quality issues that you come across? And how might you advise these revenue cycle and technical leaders to keep an eye out for that or even fix them when they find them?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. A very good question. Part of that, I would love to have my technical staff next to me because they're going to give a layer of depth that probably I don't have. I'll give you my perspective on it. One is the contract loads. They're not accurate and they're not accurately interpreted. So the interpretation, the way you interpret a contract or a policy and then translate that into a system, that's very problematic. Like I said, I feel very confident I can poke holes in systems in those loads, in whatever matrix they use to load those contracts and policies and the hierarchy they use. That's a big data problem from a higher level. Obviously, as you get in the weeds and we create a parallel database, there's a lot of more, technical things I'm maybe ignorant of, but I've heard staff talk about them in terms of different types of coding, different types of data feeds they're getting from the clearinghouse, things like that. But I'm just what I see mainly that resonates with me is the translation of contracts or policies is not happening in a system in an effective way. It's incorrect oftentimes, especially in more complex scenarios. And that filters down to cause problems with patient estimation, with negotiating your contracts. It causes huge negotiation problems with holding payers accountability, net revenue, impact revenue integrity, root cause denial, those types of things.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I've, had this conversation with some health systems actually recently where the expected reimbursement that your system is showing you for a single claim is not matching what the payer paid, despite the payer believing they paid in full. A few things can be happening. One of them could simply be that you're not calculating correctly because you don't have that level of precision that it often takes a third-party technology to get you to. But the other could be an interpretation difference between how your managed care, your revenue cycle team interpreted what's on a contract versus how it got entered into your system. There's one potential breakdown there. But then what you often see too is actually we interpreted our contract the way we think we should. We built it in our system the way we think we should. We're happy with the output. But at that point, now it's just a differentiation between how you've interpreted the contract and how the payer has interpreted the contract. But unless you do those other things correctly, you can't even get to that conversation. And then it brings us back to policies and keeping up with policies. So I'm seeing what you're seeing. Just put it that way.
This show was brought to you by Real Partners Consulting, a free-to-provider vendor selection support company. We help healthcare providers find the right revenue cycle partners across technology, consulting, and managed services at no cost to you. If you like what you've heard from today's guest, or if you're looking for any other partner in the revenue cycle space, let us do the heavy lifting for you. Reach out to me, your host, Ryan Downs, on LinkedIn or at rdowns@realpartnersconsulting.com, and I will personally help you find the right fit. Now let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, it's very well said. And you made a great point that I didn't make. The calculation itself, if it's a complex calculation, and they're making them more complex. If it's a complex calculations, systems don't have the ability to marry those, many systems to marry those to the actual claim to get your expected reimbursement, because that requires, it's not just kind of a flat approach to taking your data and then marrying it to claim. There's hierarchies to that. There's carve outs. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of complexities with codes behind this. So you made an excellent point about the calculation itself is a problematic also.
Yeah, I think for those who haven't looked at a contract, and it's not like I've read through a full one. I mean, a contract between a large health system and a large payer, it's not X percent of charges or X percent of Medicare rates. It is maybe that's your default. And then here's hundreds or thousands of pages carving everything out and then pointing to all the hundreds of policies that are ever changing too. I mean, it's this vast network of, dare I say, intentional confusion so that it's difficult for providers to keep up. And I think what I'm hearing with your typical EHRs, which would be your first built-in course of technology that can get you to that expected reimbursement, a lot of them can get you 90% of the way there, but there's going to be plenty of known examples where your current technology, if you're relying on your EHR, it simply ain't going to get you there.
Or incorporating groupers and things like, yeah, you're exactly right. Yes. You said that very, very well. Yeah. That's, you hit the nail on the head.
So calculations in and of itself, difficult, so many layers to these things. Thankfully here, and I think part of the reason we're able to have these discussions, you mentioned it before, it's AI, right? I don't think we could keep up with rules-based versions of this incredibly well, given the amount of change that's always happening. But now with AI, we're doing a better job of it. So I know you've written a couple articles actually, or Parathon has written a couple articles. So I got my little cheat sheet here. I'm going to rattle off a couple of those, and maybe you can tell me what you remember from some of the things that were said there. We'll just see see where it takes us. But I've done this a couple times. It's kind of fun.
Sounds fun. Yeah, no problem.
So first one was titled, "Why Hospitals Need to Integrate Their Data into an LLM like ChatGPT." Well, we all love talking about ChatGPT here in 2026. Yes. So from what you remember, can you summarize that article? Tell us how LLMs can help turn complexity into clarity.
Yeah, excellent. And this is very cool that you brought these articles. I love this. So, and I love talking about this stuff. So first of all, let me just say, you're doing this in a secure environment, right? You're not doing it over the web. So we're partnered with Microsoft through Azure, which it's all HIPAA compliant, SOC secure, everything. But why it is so important, this was the aha moment that I had was, human language, this is, I'll get a little esoteric, which probably, but human language has been mapped now to maybe an 87, 8%, 90% degree, meaning all the correlations and relationships between numbers and data and words is understood by these large language models. So when you can take your data and effectively integrate that into a large language model, you can immediately start to understand trends. You can ask questions about trends. You can ask questions about root causes in a way you never could before. Prior to that, people could be looking through, Epic. They could be looking through analytic dashboards like ours. They could be looking through different systems trying to pinpoint things. And that was kind of their proprietary knowledge. And that would take time. It could take, maybe if it's a difficult root cause, it could take a few weeks to figure out, right? Well, by integrating your data with an LLM, you're essentially figuring that out in real time in a minute or even sometimes a few seconds. And that's going to absolutely, no doubt in my mind, change the game completely. It's not going to happen overnight. It's slowly taking place, but there's no way it can't. And if you're really going to compete with payers, to arbitrate with payers, to go in effective JOCs, you need this kind of information to call them out on underpayments, to call them out when they audit you on overpayments. You're going to need this kind of ability to be able to do it. And it starts with integrating data with an LLM, which in itself is a very complex process.
It is fascinating. And for those out there, just to timestamp it, we're recording this on April 22nd. It's not going to get released probably till the summer. And between now and then, there's going to be even so much growth in AI. So give Josh and I some leniency and be nice to us. All right. Things may have changed between now and then. Not may have, they will, because it's just astounding the pace at which AI is growing. I had another article there too. So that one was called GPT for Lost Cash. So kind of leaning into some of the same things, but it talked about agentic AI, which I'd say AI was probably 2025's word of revenue cycle. Agentic AI might be the 2026 word. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, about agentic AI and how, in your terms in that article, it can take us from manual, retrospective, and episodic methods to continuous forecastable financial control system. It's a lot of big words there, but I think I see where it's going.
Yeah. So first, it's important to say with agentic AI, there's some misunderstanding. Like what I've realized with AI is there still always needs to be human governance and human accountability. You can't just make the AI, accountable for everything. But it's undeniable that using agents to do some of your less complex tasks is very possible. And by agentic AI, what I refer to it is where a revenue cycle or a managed care or a CFO or a finance executive works in tandem with AI to create some agents, to wake up each morning and see, what patient balances are over 90 days and just have that function automated. So they don't have to constantly dig through reports or dig through, financials. And this is real world examples that I'm seeing. See what the impact is on a daily basis of, emergency room denials or downgrades and why that's happening. So an expert in the future, it will be more prevalent, but an expert can work in tandem with AI to program these agents to do these skills. And agentic AI just means, in my mind, is programming agents to do some skills. It will get more and more sophisticated and more complex, but you're already seeing it across other industries. AI is doing the more remedial programming. It's doing, you've seen it in even some low level kind of denials, the ability to do some of that stuff related to denials. But that's kind of agentic. But I think it's going to be, the future is one in which the most effective employee is going to be one that understands AI and how to use AI to program agents and to use it for answers.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. And I'm gonna actually skip to another question I was going to ask later, because I think you teed us up for it. So as we see these radical shifts in technology, what skills or capabilities will future revenue cycle leaders and operators need that weren't really required before this AI boom? So other than just saying they need to understand AI to some degree, like what do you think the future leaders of revenue cycle are going to look like? What do you think the providers are going to be searching for that might be a little bit different than your historic profile of a revenue cycle leader?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And I think it's going to be it's obviously their subject matter expertise is going to be important, but it's always going to be important. It's going to serve as the foundation. But that person's ability to work with AI to understand maybe the higher level of configuring an agent of of ensuring that their data is translated in a way that AI can have. It's just that interchange between AI. They're going to have to be a little more sophisticated around AI. The good news is a lot of it, it has a lot of the functions and it's built with a lot of the data elements, and companies like us are translating the data to be able to communicate the revenue cycle data. But that person in the future, they have to be able to, one, be creative in terms of how they leverage AI. So creativity is a very important function because prompts alone can mean the difference between millions of dollars for a hospital or losing $1 million. And that's just being able to prompt engineer. So they're going to have a prompt engineering perspective. They won't necessarily be able to be fine tuning experts, but there's going to have to be a little bit of fine tuning. Sometimes language and revenue cycle, it's still, it's picking up on the LLMs are picking up on those more. People have different language. The LLMs understand it all, but they sometimes don't know where to apply it to the data, because you might say something one way. You're going to have, I know you have like a accounting back. You're going to look at something completely different than me, and you might present it in a different way. So the models have to understand that. So in the future, the people have to have the ability to, one, do what's called a little bit of fine tuning, to be able to do a little bit of prompt engineering, be able to work with the prompts. They don't have to be programmed, but they have to understand this world. It's inevitable because a CFO that's looking to acquire facilities or to sell off facilities, the data that AI can provide in terms of that is undeniably impactful. And looking at why we're losing money, root causes, it's undeniable. It's overwhelmingly impactful.
Yeah. I think the first thing you said is what stands out to me is just having still that industry expertise, that subject matter expertise, and knowing what to look out for that draws a red flag. And if you don't have that industry expertise, that's not going to happen. And so I think there's going to be
correct.
And maybe this is the accountant in me, like you said, my old actual educational background in accounting, be skeptical. And I think you could only do that well if you understand the industry, if you understand the subject matter. So in this case, revenue cycle. Because if AI is going to get you 90% of the way there, 95% of the way there, you need that expertise to get to 100%. Also, if AI is going to be wrong to whatever degree at the time, you need to be skeptical and knowledgeable enough to know
Excellent point.
this doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
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 So I know.
And I
I
laugh
mean,
because, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, no, it's just, and maybe I'm just like holding on to this because I consider myself a revenue cycle geek, right? And I'm always trying to keep up with the latest and greatest. So maybe I'm self-serving in saying that I think that's what's going to be needed, as opposed to the creativity thing. That's a great point. But yeah, I really do believe that you're still going to need experts, period.
Oh, 100%. And you made an excellent point. I seen it happen. I see it happen almost on a weekly basis. AI it wants to make you happy to a certain extent sometimes.
Yeah.
And it might, it might take an answer and maybe fib a little bit or, exaggerate on it a little bit. So there's no doubt you have to have that core foundational expertise. No doubt about it. But the people that have the core foundational expertise and leverage AI could outperform an entire building of people that have just the core expertise. One person with core expertise in their given subject using an AI model, in my mind, will be able to outperform, an entire group of people that are doing this. So that's why I think it's so important to have not only the foundation, but be able to leverage these tools. Because you need them both. You can't just have the tools. The tools alone just don't work. You need the experts, the consultants, the people that have them, but they have to be leveraging these tools to do that.
Yeah, it's almost like you need the prompt expert and the subject matter expert, because if you get the prompt wrong, but you don't know the subject matter, you won't be able to tell that the outcome is wrong. And if you get the
Yeah.
and on the flip side, if you get the
Well
prompt
said.
right, but you don't know the subject matter, well, maybe the prompt didn't actually fit the problem for the outcome that you're looking for. And so to some degree, that is still the infrastructure we live in today. We have our technical resources, we have our operational resources, but now that's just transforming to where the operators are going to be able to work much more directly with the technology. And I hope that it just kind of forces more cohesion between the two, because there's always, not always, often a big breakdown in that liaising between those departments.
That is
in
an
revenue
excellent
cycle.
point. You hit that's spot on. You're right. There is. And you're right that hopefully they're starting to merge a lot more. It's not that you go to somebody to do a script for data. With AI, today you should be able to kind of start to interchange with your data, ask questions about it, and get to that drill down to those bottom line answers. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Now, thanks for helping us think about what the future skill set might look like. Outside of skill set, going back to tech. So let's talk about the future of analytics. Let's talk about the future of automation. So let's first do next 12 to 18 months. So again, April 2026. So let's fast forward to Q2, Q3, Q4 of 2027. Take out your what's it called? The magic
You mean the magic ball or the
crystal ball?
I know what you're talking about, but I'm drawing a blank.
I'll edit this out. Yeah,
No, it's all good. No, don't edit it out. Keep it in. It's make it fun.
Keep it in. We're real people here. We're not AI. Yeah. Take out your crystal ball. 12 to 18 months from
Crystal
now.
ball, yes.
Yeah, we got it. What does revenue cycle look like from an analytics? So let's start there. What does analytics look like in 12 to 18 months? And I would say I will to trigger something further, because I think you said it before. What does, maybe I'll reword it. What does the interaction between an operator and analytics look like in 12 to 18 months? So what's it look like today? And then what's it look like when AI is wherever that gets going to be in 2027?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I deal with this a lot because I'm involved in a lot of product meetings and so it's a good question. So in my opinion, the core analytics it's still important for people to visualize things, to log in and see, their cash reserves, see their AR days, to see, how much cash they have, denial, those kind of things. That's still important. But what I envision in 12 to 18 months is the ability to then interact with that data, very similar like to how you use, Gemini or ChatGPT or something like that, to be able to then ask questions and continue to drill down in the data. So you want to wake up and you want to see your dashboards, nice dashboards that are easy to view and see is still a UI is still very relevant. But in addition, you want to be able to drill down. You want to know if there's a problem. Instantly, you want to be able to communicate it with an AI. To do that, though, you have to translate your data. Your data has to be in a format. You need something like the parallel database that is translated into a large language model. The schemas have to be translated for the large language models to understand them. But that's what I think the future is in 12 to 18 months. That's I think a pretty realistic thing that could happen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think we're well on our way there. It's kind of the jump.
Yeah, you're seeing it too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think we're going to go from looking at a dashboard, which makes you think, okay, why is cash down? Why is aging's up? And then going and doing the research, or asking somebody, depending on what position you're in, asking somebody to do that research, to cash is down, aging's are up, health system GPT. Why? Here's the 5 main reasons. And then it gets back to expertise and skepticism of, does this pass the gut check? What do I need to do to confirm this is actually correct? And then still maybe asking GPT as you're doing that, having a conversation. But now within minutes, you have a good likely answer, as opposed to somebody's got to go do the research and then we got to have a meeting about it. And so now I can then act on that. And then you probably even take it a step further. It's no longer just going to say, you're no longer going to have to even ask it. It's probably just going to say, hey, Ryan, cash is down, agings are up. Here's the 5 reasons why. and here's the 5 things we would suggest you do about it. Click here to do it. Like, that's where I think we're headed.
Yeah.
Which is scary.
And you're right. That's more of the agentic, generative kind of whatever buzzword you want, but that's a little more agentic, generative. But to your point,
Yeah.
you're always going to need somebody to validate that. But yeah, you should be able to wake up and go, hey, I'm seeing it happen now, but it's not quite at that point where it's more about, it could give you some suggestions. It's not quite where it's perfected in, how I can communicate that. It can give you some suggestions. You could wake up and see some things. It can tell you some things, but you really still have to prompt engineer to kind of get to the root cause of a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I think the example I gave might be just your initial response. I would not be surprised, though, certainly not, if in 12 to 18 months, there's still people that are like, okay, but this time I still want the Excel export, and I'm going to go pivot.
Oh, no,
Like-
that I'm not surprised. I see that day in, day out. In fact,
for sure.
I deal with that all the time. People still want the Excel reports. They love them. And we provide them because we have all the data for negotiations, for strategic pricing increases, for underpayment root causes denials. And still, it's very prevalent. They can, people are asking some questions, but people want the Excel spreadsheets. They want the pivot tables. That I don't think that's going away. But I will tell you this, what AI can do right now, very simply, and we do all the time, is we'll provide them with the pivot tables, the Excel things. They can upload those as well into the language model and ask questions specifically about that. Like, what do you see in this? Do you see any trends? What's going on here? Why is this happening? So you can get that and you can analyze it, but you can also just upload that and ask questions about it.
Yeah, that's nice. At that point, you feel very confident that the data set that you're asking it questions on is exactly the data set you want. Because it's really easy, I think, in today's version of communicating with the technical person who's going to write that script. I always use the example, you and I have probably had this conversation before, always use the example of, give me denials in the month of March. Well, I didn't specify which date. Is it the posting of the denial date? Is it the remit date? Is it the charge date? Is it whatever, right? And then a lot of people say, I hate this, but it's unfortunately true. A lot of people say denials write-offs. Did you mean denials or did you mean denials write-offs? So there's a million ways to kind of get the wrong data set up front. And then if you're asking questions on the wrong data set, you're kind of screwed from the start.
You wouldn't believe how resonant that comment is with me. I mean, we deal with that all the time because, and the AI will ask you, well, did you mean denials that were written off? Did you mean, remits? Did you mean for the physician facility? It will ask this unlimited amount of questions. So, it can get a little frustrating and it's getting better at figuring it out. But you do have to, your example was spot on. Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad you're solving for that already. Looking ahead a little bit, where do you see AI creating the most real operational value in revenue cycle way out 5+ years?
5+ years? That's a lot. And AI, that could
I know, I might be asking too much.
That could be, I mean, there might be an AI bubble, who knows, but AI is not going anywhere. There was for people that are a little bit older, we went through the, the web bubble and everything, but the technologies themselves never went anywhere. But 5 years could be, wow, that could be a very big impact. I mean, I do think there's going to be, I think I don't want to go clinical. We're not really clinical. We touch clinical from a physician standpoint, but to drive down costs, there's going to be a lot of robotic stuff more and more prevalent in 5 years. I really believe that, to drive down costs to the patients, and robots and these sophisticated models are the only way to do that, I think. And, you're already starting to see, like over in Asia, autonomous robots that do some of the nursing function, the medical assistant functions. So in 5 years, I think that we will be seeing a world where robots are a little more prevalent. 10 years, it's going to be crazy, I think. So that's kind of the sci-fi part of me that sees that.
I know, I get it, man.
Yeah, it's coming. It will drive down costs. There's just no way around it. And people will, you're still going to want to talk to your physician, and your physician is needed, but if people have a choice between, a surgery this way or that way, they might choose something that's more AI driven. I don't know. I think that will be prevalent. I'm not an expert in that. 5 years in terms of like revenue cycle and finance and managed care, I think it's just going to be a real battle between the AI systems. Like there's no reason that if payers release, they can look at the way using AI, they can look at every medical best practice and every financial best practice and create policies related to that. And it's very difficult to defend against those unless you're using AI on the other side. So I guess and I wrote a little article. I think there's going to be this real-time AI battling between, people that have their act together and people that don't. And if you don't have your act together in terms of AI, then you're going to be hurt sufficiently so there's going to be a lot more of these autonomous systems. There's going to be more generative stuff. There's going to be more agentic stuff. And yeah, that's kind of what I see in 5 years is a lot of time in the AI world.
I know.
In my mind. Yeah.
No, I agree. You used the last word that I want to touch on there, autonomous. So if we define autonomous here for this conversation as really human out of the loop, like fully autonomous, 5 years from now, I'm not saying revenue cycle can be fully autonomous necessarily, but a lot of the parts of revenue cycle could potentially be autonomous at that point in time, like talking myself out of a job. I guess two things. One, do you think a largely autonomous revenue cycle is realistic in 5 years? And then two, I've heard this, right? If at that point in time, it's just semi-autonomous provider fighting semi-autonomous payer in revenue cycle to where they're just both spending a ton of money on data centers and insurance, right? Cybersecurity insurance. Do they just like, oh, wait, we're actually losing money fighting each other. Let's just go back to being friends and care about the patients again. I've always joked that I would gladly give up my revenue cycle career if it just meant that we all kumbaya and start caring about patients again. But anyways, yeah. So do you think 5 years, largely autonomous revenue cycle is realistic? And do you think it could get to a point in time where it actually brings payers and providers together because they're just AI fighting AI?
I do not think fully autonomous because you need accountability and you still need expertise for the check and balances of these models. So I do believe it's going to be semi-autonomous. Like, for instance, you can get somebody that's maybe newer in the revenue cycle or an analyst or something, and some of those newer functions could be more autonomous, but you still need the experience of an executive, an accountant, of a finance executive to work with these models to understand trends. And there has to be accountability. You cannot make systems accountable for your thing. The systems can help you, but there has to be human accountability. So I think semi-autonomous is the way I would see. You can't put away with, because then somebody's going to blame, oh, the system, did this. But at the end of the day, there has to be people in revenue cycle, managed care, finance, CFOs, CEOs that are accountable for these things, security people, etc. And, the possibility exists that it could lead to some kind of mutual thing. I don't know if in 5 years, maybe some kind of mutual beneficial, but the problem is everybody's fighting for a limited amount of dollars. That's really what's happening. Nobody wants to talk about that, but everybody's fighting for a limited amount of healthcare dollars, and they're slowly diminishing a little bit. And when you're fighting, you could say all the, nice things you want, but it's more difficult to do that. Now, maybe I don't know if the government gets involved or what, or how it happens. So I see my answer would be semi-autonomous, some things being, easier things being fully autonomous. But I'm not sure about if they're fighting for the same dollar, how that relation, it would be better if there might be closer bonds. But some of these companies are publicly traded and they're accountable to the shareholders. So you have to really look at it in a sophisticated way that, we're accountable to make sure our patients have the best life. You're accountable to the shareholders. How do we have that fine balance? But yeah, AI could probably help with some of that stuff. So that's my long-winded answer there.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the most likely outcome, right? Like semi-autonomous solutions, and there's still being a lot of the same problems that we face today. We're just handling them differently. But yeah, fiduciary responsibility of these large payers, that's a whole different conversation that, if you ask me, is a probably the core of a lot of the problems we face in revenue cycle
yeah.
today.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, that's more, that would have to be governmental change.
Now, there's
Anyway.
one point I want to make that I think is very
Yeah.
important is that, and nobody's really talked about this at all, and this is outside of revenue cycle, but this is something that I'm a strong believer in. The other thing AI is going to do, you were talking about 5 years, and hospital executives haven't realized this, is that there's going to be this closer combination between pharma and hospitals. Hospitals sit on data that can be used for the development of biomarkers. And biomarkers in of themselves are very valuable to pharmaceutical companies. So there's going to be this merging of better understanding how we can develop biomarkers based on our data. And not to get too off topic, but that is
it's
a
interesting.
super important point that I think is coming, because they're going to have to look for other revenue streams. And to me, that is a natural revenue stream. Partnering with vendors now, you're starting to see this, like the ensemble model and these different models. I mean, it essentially created these massive companies. You're going to see more and more of that, especially around AI. So two other trends that I see. I'll be quiet now.
No, it's a really good point. I mean, like, data is becoming such a critical such a critical asset in any company. And these hospitals and health systems have an incredible amount of data.
Yes.
If we harness it correctly, we can absolutely turn it into alternative revenue streams safely, and maybe even to the benefit of patients, right? When it comes to things like
100%. Yeah.
better overarching healthcare, better clinical research, finding the right opportunities for patients, maybe in trials and things like that. Yeah, that's a fantastic point. So one more question, just to try and help some of our provider listeners out there, and then I want to give you the chance for final parting advice. So let's help some of our friends find some hidden revenue out there. So based on what you're seeing with your provider partners right now, what are the most consistent or persistent sources of revenue leakage that you're seeing that we wouldn't typically find on today's current dashboards?
It's a great question. Going through the Rolodex of all recent client conversations, really. Well, first, clients are writing off a lot of denials. And what we've seen is that you can, with the right data in your JOCs, can get to a state where you don't have to write those off. So I don't know if this is answering your question, but this is just personally stuff I'm dealing with. I'm seeing with clients writing off denials. You get them the right data points, they go into a JOC with effective data, and they're able to take care of a lot of those denials right away. So, and then they're able to understand to prevent those denials going forward. So it's kind of the denial prevention. There's a lot of buzzword around that, but it's real when you have the data and the systems to be able to provide that up front. You can prevent those, but it often leads to arbitration, or it often leads to JOCs, and you have to be willing to go, but you have to have data that supports that. So that's one area. The other is, like I said, we don't mind doing a second or a third zero balance audit, because we know we have a sophisticated validation engine that's going to show where underpayments are happening, and there's audits that you could impact and things like that. So that's kind of a higher level thing, but the devil's in the detail is you look at, people are leaving money because they're not loading their contracts and their policies, understanding the impact policy. The other thing is policies, where there's a lot of money being left now and a lot of denials their impact, is their inability to quantify the impact of a policy within a given time frame, typically like 30 to 90 days, and be able to communicate that to a payer effectively. That's kind of lost. First, there's just so many of them, and then nobody has the AI to be able to take care of that. That's a big area. Negotiations are huge. Being able to understand all the people that I see that do the most sophisticated negotiations and price increases understand a lot of dynamics about their population, about the calculations, about their services, what they provide. So being able to have the tools to do those more effectively is very important, because you can't just, I hear it, people do it. They like arbitrarily raise prices in certain areas, and that results in a bunch of price decreases in other areas. It's just not, you have to be able to do this very sophisticatedly. There's a lot of money to be made in that if you do it properly.
Yeah,
so those
a lot
are
of great
things that
nuggets
come to mind.
No, absolutely. I'm writing all these down. So I think what I like to try and do when we have questions like this is try and kind of oversimplify and summarize. So make sure you're loading your contracts in correctly. That is something I see difficulty in many areas, but it's You called it, I think, the lifeblood, right? The contracts and the policies are the lifeblood. How the heck are you going to fight for your payments if you don't know what you're going to get paid at the claim level, at the charge level, dare I say? So load your contracts, make sure those are constantly up to date. Keep up with the ever-growing changes in policies. Do so quickly because, to your point, if you don't, I forget what the exact word is, but basically, if you don't go back to the payer and say that this is going to materially and adversely impact us, or it's against what we agreed upon in our contract within a certain amount of time, good luck. You've missed your opportunity. Don't write off things too soon. I made a post about this in April or March after the first set of quarterly authorization data came out, and it's something like 80% of auth denials can be overturned, but only like 12% of them are actually appealed. Go appeal those things. Contract negotiations, strategic pricing is something I'm hearing more than I've ever heard. Maybe that, biased just based on what's been coming to me. But I do think as we get better with the day-to-day revenue cycle, leaning back into that lifeblood is critical. And then finally, near and dear to my heart and what I do at Real Partners, double, or dare I say triple down on your contingent vendors. So whether it's ZBA, whether it's bad debt collection, coverage discovery, a lot of these things that are strictly contingent. You only pay if they're doing good work for you. Other than, yes, I understand there's an implementation cost, even if that cost is just time. There's a security risk of having more vendors. But if you do those things well, you do those things thoughtfully, you have guardrails in place, you can't lose by having these extra
100%.
contingent vendors.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, and those vendors that they come back to you and they tell you, even though we're cannibalizing work for ourselves, here's what we found and here's how to stop it from leaking going forward, right? I think that's table stakes at this point too. So not only are you getting the actual work, but you're figuring out how to prevent it from continuing to leak going forward. So love it. Hopefully did it okay there of capturing some of the things you were thinking about.
It was awesome, man. Great.
I think the nuggets you just shared kind of did this, but I'm going to ask anyway, because I ask everybody, any final parting advice for our listeners?
I would just double down on it's becoming more and more important to understand the impact to the penny of contracts and policies. They impact your denials, they impact your revenue, they impact your underpayments, they impact everything. And it's kind of shocking to me sometimes that a lot of hospitals can't do that, but I understand why, because there's just so many of them now. There's just so many policies. So I think that's the root cause. Like I said, I think that's the lifeblood. And if it is the lifeblood, it's more important now than ever to get a hold of this, because it's going to be more and more problematic going forward. Everybody's working off the same dollar. They're fighting for the same dollar, and those dollars are limited. I read some articles recently that a lot of there's going to be impacts from some of these policy decisions from the government that will impact hospitals. So this is more important than ever. It will impact these publicly traded insurance companies as well. So who have fiduciary responsibilities. So you have to be able to fight. And the beginning of that fight starts with understanding your contracts and your policies.
I like that. That last line is money right there. That's a good one. Josh, thanks for being a part of the show. We dropped a lot of knowledge today. Until next time.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Great.
That's a wrap on yet another episode of Vendor Voices. Huge thanks to our guests for their insights and to you for listening. If this episode gave you something to think about, share it with your team. If you'd like to suggest a specific topic or guest, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or at rdowns@realpartnersconsulting.com. Please rate and review, and be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode. I'm Ryan Downs. Thanks for tuning in.